This time, on the Adventures of Tarka, I load up on some provisions, discover that my brand new bottom paint doesn't really work, and depart on my longest passage to date, a 4-day sail to Bonaire. The time has finally come, after spending the hurricane season in the relative safety of Grenada, and using that time to make major improvements to Tarka, and maybe having a bit of fun here and there. It's time to start heading west. First though, I sail Tarka back to the quiet little True Blue Bay, which will save me a whopping 5 miles on my 400-mile trip. The actual reason for coming back to this bay was to pick up several important packages, which had arrived just in time for my departure. The first is a storm jib, which I have no way to hoist right now, but will later be adding a removable inner stay just for this purpose. But that job is going to have to wait. The second is almost a year's supply of Soylent. If you don't know what Soylent is, it's basically powdered food that you mix up to make something similar to a protein shake. I know it seems pretty weird, but to me it was actually a perfect solution to some of my provisioning needs. I should mention that Soylent donated these provisions in support of my efforts to raise awareness and money for the Coral Reef Alliance, but just to be perfectly clear, I was going to be using Soylent as part of my provisioning strategy anyway. Unfortunately, I made an unpleasant discovery below the water. Even though the bottom paint on Tarka is only a few months old, the warm murky waters of Grenada's base had taken their toll, and every square inch of Tarka's bottom had a barnacle on it. I was even growing a small coral reef on the propeller. I said I wanted to sail for coral, not with it. The outboard had also established a community of hard and soft growth, and the bottom of the dinghy had more biodiversity than many places I've seen while snorkeling. In all, it was a pretty disgusting job. And I think my expression shows pretty well how I felt about it. It took almost half a day to clean the bottom of the dinghy, so I decided to leave a day later than planned. Because this trip is pretty long anyway, and I don't know what speed I'll make, I didn't try to time my departure in such a way that I would arrive in daylight. Instead, I just set sail when I wanted to, and I think leaving at sunset is one of the best times to leave. Plus, there's something extra special about sailing away into the sunset. Grenada was beautiful the last I saw of her. I'm actually not extra fond of the island, and maybe that's because I spent so many days working hard in her bays. But still, it's hard to say goodbye to a place that has been your home for a while. The first night I sailed out with a lazy Genoa. This wasn't ideal in any way, but it did give me enough speed to distance myself from the island, and allow me to get some sleep. The next day, I wanted to go a bit faster, so I pulled out the Genoa and raised the mainsail. I should say that downwind sailing is entirely new to me, so I spent quite a lot of time trying to figure things out. I certainly didn't do things the best way all of the time. And a few guidelines on this pole would have been smart, especially because it started rubbing up against my brand new rigging. For the time being though, I adjusted the sheet tension and added some chafe protection. The course I decided to take put me well off the coast of Venezuela, and perhaps unfortunately, far from the beautiful Los Rocas Islands. These are troubled times for Venezuela, and there have been incidents of piracy offshore in some of those areas. so I just decided to play it safe this time. I did encounter a fishing boat after a day or so of sailing, and I got a little worried when they changed their course to get a little closer to me, but they eventually proceeded about their business, and I think they were just curious. I slept in 20-minute intervals, keeping an eye out for traffic in between, but otherwise kept a fairly normal morning routine. The passage was very rolling, making even the most basic tasks difficult, and sometimes maybe dangerous. You know, I really envy all those people with their gimbaled stoves. Luckily though, I had Soylent on board, and this was easy and safe to prepare, and nutritious to boot. No, I wasn't eating it for every meal, but it did reduce the amount of cooking and dishwashing I had to do. For the most part, there wasn't much that needed to be done on passage, and I spent most of my time just reading books. About once a day, though, I attacked the boat to account for wind change or adjust the course. For a bit of extra safety, I had my AIS collision alarm set as well, which did alert me to several large vessels before I saw them on the horizon. Distance 6.3 miles, closest approach is 1.5, 1.2. No name yet. They're gonna come pretty close to me though. Almost looks like a collision. Rather large boat, about 5 miles. In that direction. Just barely see it there. My AIS also alerted me to the only sailing vessel I saw on the entire passage. Eventually they became visible on the horizon, saw my sails, and called me on the radio. It was nice to talk to fellow sailors. And they were even kind enough to give me an update on the weather forecast.
Later at midnight, 17 to 20 during the night, and going a little bit more on east, northeast a little bit, and then at 3 o'clock the same up to 21 knots.
Okay, so I don't feel too bad about going to sleep with only one reef in the main. Bigger and faster than little Tarka, though, they slowly overtook me on their way to Bonaire, disappearing into the setting sun. But not before taking some pretty cool photos of Tarka and I. It was also nice to know that I would already have a few friends when I arrived in Bonaire. I am now halfway to Bonaire, making good time and pleasantly sailing downwind with reefed sails. I've found there's a certain peace out here surrounded by nothing but ocean. And it's sort of nice to know that I'm the only one with this view of this particular sunset. A few days beyond that setting sun, though, Bonaire awaits me. But my arrival there will have to wait until next time.